It is so wonderful to see Paula and Richard sitting in this first row today. Man, I might get a little evangelical about that, but I mean, it is so wonderful to know that you will be standing right here in the next few months, and we're so blessed to have you here. We're so excited. And of course, I do want to thank Valerie for she will be orchestrating many of these images today. In fact, Christopher, I'm not here today. I'm a hologram, so hopefully something will show up. You know, knowing that we were going to be doing this July 4th talk, going back several months ago, we talked to Donna about it, I decided I needed to do my research. So you see, for some of you in the front, you can see some of the books we have here, and went to the internet, did a lot, went to listen to some of the old radio shows, but I knew that I had to go to the ultimate font of wisdom and knowledge. And that, of course, would be my 85-year-old mother from New Jersey. My good 85-year-old Catholic mother from New Jersey. And over the years, we've had some good give and take, especially about spiritual issues. Now, don't be fooled for some of you who have not heard my talks about my 85-year-old mother. She is not a small, frail, blue-haired lady. She's very opinionated, very candid to a fault, and if my brother and my sister and I cross her, she will take us out. Sorry. I guess an homage to Indian lore. But, you know, and I have been to college, and I've been to law school, I've gone to grad school, and people have always asked me, what is your toughest course of study? I said, my mother is my master's course in life. So we do exchange these stories, and I was up in New Jersey recently, and we got to talking about the founding of the country, and I said, you know, Mom, the men and the women of this country had high spiritual ideals. She said, oh, yes, they were Christians. I said, well, they were, but they were something else. She goes, no, this is a Christian nation. And I said, would you be willing to perhaps entertain the notion of something alternative? And she said, sure, I'll listen, but my mind's already made up. So I decided to share this story. It is morning, July 4th, 1826. The United States is turning 50 years old today. The nation is now 10 million people strong. Its states number 25. Its territories extend from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. America's sense of nationhood has taken root, its canopy spreading over vast realms of forest, prairie, mountains, desert, rivers, and streams. And the federal government has now been in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. 5 men have occupied the office of the presidency. And now a new generation of Americans is literally taking up the reins. One of 2 living signers of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams, sees his son, John Quincy, become our 6th president. Now, anticipating the young nation's 50th birthday, towns and villages, cities and hamlets have been preparing for months. Now, they're ready to celebrate. Parades and picnics, sermons, concerts, town halls, and gatherings of every kind jubilantly mark the day. The mayor of Washington, D.C. has planned a glorious 4th. 2,000 pounds of gunpowder will create a fireworks display he hopes will echo all the way to New England. His greatest wish, to have Thomas Jefferson present in the capital city that day, have been dashed by the apologetic Jefferson's illness. What did the 4th of July mean to those people celebrating that first milestone, the 50th anniversary? What does it mean to us today? And I mean outside of the patriotism and the political freedom. This is a New Thought church, after all. What does the 4th of July say about the soul of a nation? What, if anything, does the 4th of July say to your soul? The founders were Christians. This is a Christian nation, cried the voice from the U.S. Supreme Court steps after another controversial 5-4 decision about the separation of church and state. Without batting an eyelash, many churches and religious organizations, and my mother, believe this is true. Some have made a cottage industry out of it. I cannot comment on this particular work of art because, frankly, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But make no mistake, they're not the only ones who have created the founders in their own spiritual image. I'll turn to Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO on a Friday night, and he and Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris will be talking about the founders, and they'll say, no, don't you know? They were all atheists. Everyone likes to co-opt the founders. You know, there's a very prominent Christian organization here in town, and I feel like I can poke just a little bit of fun because I went to school there many, many moons ago. And they have a 5-star hotel, just minutes from here, right? National Broadcasting Organization. And the Founders Inn is their 5-star hotel and spa. And they have a big sign out front. And the implication, of course, is very clear. These founders, don't you know, were undeniably Christian. And, pardon me, I can't help myself, but I will pass this sign on Centerville Turnpike, and I'll look up at the bus and say to no one in particular, deist, Unitarian, don't know, Freemason, who knows? But everyone likes to co-opt the founders. And forgive me if I demonstrate some of that same hubris today as my evangelical and atheist friends. But I think what made the founders great in matters of the Spirit was that they could not be placed in a box. They were moving targets. They couldn't be pigeonholed. Take George Washington, for instance, a vestryman in a Virginia Episcopal church. His wife, Martha, very religious, gave lots of sermons. But clearly, George Washington was a Freemason. And Freemasonry was an esoteric religious influence that was brought from Europe to America. After the Revolution, George never took communion. And despite all of the paintings we've seen to the contrary, the story is he did not kneel to pray, at least in church. Rarely, if ever, did he refer to Jesus in his public speaking. And anytime he referred to God, it was always the word providence, a term you're not going to find in the Bible. And at the end of his second term, a group of clerics who were a little unsure of his Christianity submitted a bevy of questions to him about the country, and they gave him one question. They asked him to clarify his Christianity. And George skipped right over the question. Thomas Jefferson called him the sly fox. And on his deathbed, there was plenty of time to call a minister, but none was called. When it came to matters of the Spirit, Benjamin Franklin did not follow the script. He openly admired George Whitefield's evangelizing. He kept the Bible in his top drawer, put little notes in the margins. But he was a Unitarian. He believed in reincarnation, and he featured astrology, of all things, in the Poor Richard's Almanac. One author has eloquently referred to Franklin as America's Merlin. Thomas Jefferson, native son from Virginia, our third president, of course, author of the Declaration of Independence. He invoked the name of the Supreme Being 3 times in that lauded document, but to this day we may truly not know what Jefferson's spirituality was, because in his letters to Benjamin Rush, he called himself a Christian, and yet he doubted the divinity of Jesus. What Jefferson did was something that I think even most of us would be hard-pressed to do today. He took the King James Version of the Bible and he cut it up. Took out the parts that he felt did not serve him. Now, if he had done that 200 years earlier in Europe, they would have been building a big old bonfire, you know? But here he was, free enough to challenge the spiritual and the religious authorities of the day. And today, we still have the Jefferson Bible. One word about one of his 3 greatest influences. According to Jefferson, Sir Francis Bacon was one of those influences. And I mention him because not only was he a famed scientist, but he was considered to be the founder of European Freemasonry. He was a key figure in the mystical order known as the Rosicrucians. And in the 1600s, he wrote this very curious text, America, the New Atlantis. So whatever Jefferson's personal beliefs may have been, he made sure his legacy was all about spiritual conscience. He placed his Virginia Statute for Religious Liberty at the very top of all of his accomplishments, save for the authoring of the Declaration of Independence. And then, of course, there's John Adams. Not Sam Adams, that's his cousin, pal. Although I'm sure John quaffed a few in his day, right? John Adams, the colorful and crusty second president of the United States, who once said his disdain for Calvinists, who were the conservative religionists of the day, was surpassed only by his contempt for Catholics. Ouch. He rejected Christian orthodoxy. He said, "I refuse to accept that one bite from an apple damned the whole human race." Eventually, Adams joined a liberal Unitarian church, which emphasized Christ's teachings rather than his divinity. Now, I don't want to sound as if all of these men were perfect spiritual human beings. Listening to John Adams, you know that's not so. And we don't have the time today to discuss some of the atrocities that their generation perpetrated against the American Indian. And in addition to the American Indians, of course, the crimes of slavery. You should hear what Frederick Douglass had to say about a slave's perspective of the 4th of July. We don't have time for that today. I think Paula may have time for that sometime later this year. Nor do we have time today to talk about the stains against our highest ideals in this nation, from the Spanish-American War, Vietnam, Iraq. Those are topics for another day. But to be clear, the faith and beliefs of these founders could not be typecast. You couldn't put them in a box. They always reserve the right to change their mind. Now, how do I know that for myself, personally? Here's why. Just take a look at that symbol and take it in for a minute. As Rod Stewart once said, the great rocker philosopher, every picture tells a story. Do we really need words to know the metaphysical bent of our founding fathers? This is the reverse of the Great Seal. And this Great Seal was commissioned on July 4th, 1776. And none other than Jefferson and Adams and Franklin were put together on the commission to come up with the Great Seal. And clearly, you can see, it's a wondrous, intriguing, and mysterious symbol. And today, of course, it graces the back of our dollar bill. So this source of endless fascination you'd carry around in your pocket every day. And what do you think they were saying here? What were they saying? Right? You don't even need words for that. But if you do like words, you want words, go to the Bible, one of those great mystical passages that got past the Council of Nicaea early on. Let thine eye be single, and thy whole body shall be full of light. From Matthew 6:22. Of course, the words annuit septis up top, God favors our undertakings, and below that in Latin, the new order of the ages. Mitch Horowitz, in his fine book, Occult America, and please don't be thrown by that word. I know it's a hard word, especially those last 4 letters, but occult only means that which is hidden. In his book, he says, it's telling that they settled upon this very occult Freemason influence-looking symbol, this eye hovering above the pyramid, that worldly achievement is incomplete without inner knowing, without inner spiritual vision, without the blessings of providence. And it should be no surprise that this symbol was used, because Washington and Franklin and Hancock and Jefferson, these men were all Freemasons. And at its heart, Freemasonry believed in ecumenism, or ecumenism, as some people like to say. Imagine radical, free-thinking folks sitting down at the table, honoring all faiths, all embracing, all inclusive. Now, we take this for granted today. I mean, just look at the church you're sitting in today. Look at the plethora of beliefs of the folks that come to a unity church. But back in those days, that was a radical idea. And it wasn't as if the Freemason founding fathers were trying to replace Christianity. They simply believed in a primeval religious philosophy, one that united us, one that predated all of man's religions. As a matter of fact, they felt it went back literally to ancient Egypt. And that's why the Freemasons herald back to pre-Christian religious symbols, obelisks, pyramids, monuments, the ancient world, and yes, even this, the singular eye of Horus. And who can we thank for putting this great symbol on our dollar bill? A man lost to history. His name was Henry Wallace. He was vice president to Franklin Roosevelt. He urged Roosevelt to put the reverse of the Great Seal on the back of the $1 bill. Wallace called himself a practical mystic. Now, could you imagine Joe Biden or Dick Cheney saying, yeah, I'm a practical mystic. I'm a practical mystic. Could you imagine that today in today's world? Not for a moment. They were able to say things like that. Wallace was into theosophy. He was a Freemason. He was into Buddhism. Actually, he got into some problems later down the road, but he urged our Aquarian president, Franklin Roosevelt, to put it on the back of the dollar bill. And what Roosevelt did was he put that symbol on the left-hand side. So reading left to right, the reverse of the Great Seal, you see first. The obverse of the front of the Great Seal, the eagle with the branches and the arrows, is to the right. They obviously felt something was very important about that symbol. That which is hidden had now become revealed. America owes its religious freedoms to men and women with unorthodox views of God. Those were the words of Stephen Waldman on a PBS special back in the 1990s. He's a former journalist with Newsweek. He's founder of BeliefNet, author of the book Founding Faith. And according to Mitch Horowitz, if you really want to know what the founders truly believed, go to the American Transcendentalists about a century after the founders. There you will find the pillars of new thought. Emerson, Whitman, Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott. There you will see the rebirth of our founding fathers whose spirituality leapt beyond the bounds of religion. American Transcendentalists like to call themselves members of the like-minded club. That's because, according to one of the members, no two of them thought alike. They believed in touching the sacred outside of organized religion. Now, you're going to learn a lot more about the American Transcendentalists in the months ahead. I know it's one of those pet topics of Paulus. And you'll see the tie-in to unity and Unitarianism and religious science and this great tree of esoteric spiritual thinking that is really at the core of New Thought, really at the core of the church you're sitting in today. What did July 4th say to the souls of the American Transcendentalists? What does it say to yours? It is evening, July 4th, 1826. The day's jubilation and celebrations have ended. The fireworks are done. But now, disheartening news emanating from two different places, Braintree, Massachusetts, and Monticello, Virginia, converge in the nation's collective consciousness. Thomas Jefferson, seriously weakened, semi-conscious in bed, periodically woke to ask, is it yet the 4th? When the sun rose and America reached its 50th birthday, Jefferson died. Meanwhile, John Adams, in his 91st year, but vigorous, full of life, tending his own farm, decided to take an afternoon walk, only to fall seriously ill. His life ebbing at 6 o'clock in the evening, his last words were believed to have been, and Jefferson lives. The fact that the only two remaining signers of the Declaration of Independence would expire on the 50th anniversary of signing that blessed document was beyond the comprehension of Americans everywhere. Yale mathematicians earnestly calculated the odds, which they assured the public stretched into the unfathomable millions. Daniel Webster eloquently eulogized both men, reaffirming in the minds of Americans that only divine providence could have sponsored such an act of symbolic simultaneity. What does July 4th mean to the soul of this nation? What does it mean to your soul? Is this coincidence? The hand of providence? Maybe if Carl Jung had been around at that time, he would have said that, and he did say, many of our coincidences are not due to chance. Carl Jung, of course, called it synchronicity, the experience of two or more events that are apparently causally unrelated or unlikely to occur together, yet are experienced as occurring together in a meaningful manner. And Carolyn Mace, one of the students, I think, of Carl Jung, author of Sacred Contracts and The Anatomy of the Spirit, says that the July 4th date is a new thought form incarnated in the world, signed in a document, and imprinted into the human psyche. July 4th is not merely a day, it's a psyche birth force. Jefferson and Adams dying on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration was a choreography of great divinity. Synchronicity is the X-factor voice of God, she says. There is a symbolic counterpart to all we do and experience. Synchronicity, happenstance, you'll have to decide for yourself. But even if you believe that it's just mathematical coincidence, that Jefferson and Adams' passing was just happenstance, I like what Mitch Horowitz had to say about it. You almost have to fall on your knees and honor happenstance. And just in case Americans may not have fully appreciated the meaningful coincidence of Jefferson and Adams' simultaneous passing on that July 4th, 5 years later, to the very day, founding father and fifth president James Monroe passed away, July 4th, 1831. That's right. 3 of the 5 first American presidents all passed away on that date. And who says the universal mind doesn't have a sense of timing? Perhaps the best gift that the founders have bestowed upon us would be to act as critical thinkers, but to be spiritually open-minded. Do you believe in God today? You might not tomorrow. Are you an atheist? Maybe you'll feel differently in 10 years. Jesus is the only way? Are you sure about that? Maybe that's what the essence of July 4th is. Not just about the personal and political freedom, but the freedom to doubt, the freedom to question, the freedom to shift, to evolve, to expand upon what you already believe, and to be willing to honor that in the next person's experience, to do the very same thing. And isn't that a wonderful freedom indeed? Well, that was very interesting, my mom told me. How much of that did you make up? I said, no, Mom, I did a lot of the research. I did. She goes, yeah, I'm not that impressed. But she said that Adams and Jefferson dying on the same day, she said, I never knew that. But hearing what you had to say, it really doesn't matter to me what their religion was. I'm just thankful that they acted on their beliefs and helped make this country what it is today. She says, but I still think this is a Christian nation. I said, well, Mom, you are certainly free to believe that. She said, good, and you're free to take me out to dinner. Apple pie for dessert, on you. Let's go. Whether you're with your mother this week or just reading a book on the founders, have a glorious 4th.